Hi, I'm Travis, and this is the TM Podcast. And today I'm going to talk to you about the Green River Killer, or Gary Leon Ridgway as we know him now. See, I wanted to start the podcast off with a big name like this just because it was the one that really got me into true crime as a kid. I remember someone did a report on it in school or something that just kind of got me thinking, kind of got me researching the details about it, and it was just grotesque and just disgusting, and it's something that I hadn't heard before, but it forced me to look into the details of other crimes, and then here we are. But jumping right into this, Gary Leon Ridgway was born February 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was the son of Mary Rita and Thomas Newton Ridgway. And I put Mary first because everyone that knew Mary said that she kind of wore the pants in the Ridgway household, and these guys were arguing 24/7. Gary's mom and dad argued every single day to the point that it got violent. There was kicking and screaming and throwing things, but it's said that Thomas was kind of passive and a pushover, even letting Mary hit him over the head with a glass plate one time and just kind of getting up and walking away. Gary would say that that was the common theme of the arguments with his parents, that his dad was just a pushover and let it all happen. And I'm sure that really doesn't help paint a picture of what a household is supposed to be to these kids, but it's really not all that uncommon in the 50s and 60s to have these parents arguing all the time. That still happens today. That's not the crazy part. The crazy part is that his father, Thomas, was a bus driver as well as a part-time mortician. And he would come home every day and talk to Gary and his two brothers about all the sex workers that would just be kind of loitering around all of his stops and just being in the way, and he would just talk about his hatred for these people. And on top of that, even worse, he would say to these young boys that at the mortuary where he worked, they would take advantage of the bodies, up to and including having sex with dead people. So here you have his dad talking shit about sex workers as well as normalizing necrophilia to these young boys, and it's really a surprise that the other sons didn't turn out fucking psychos either, but maybe we just don't know about that. But he wasn't the only one, he wasn't the only parent that was a little bit fucked up in the head from the beginning, because Gary's mother, Mary, was a saleswoman at J.C. Penney, and what she used to do is she actually measured men for suits. You know, she would measure their waist, their chest, their build. But she would tell Gary about every day that she would have to kneel down at these men's crotches, and she would talk about them getting aroused. She would describe to him in great detail their erections that they would get because of her playing around in their crotch, which is strange. I'm not really sure how you could describe a pants boner, but whatever. And on top of that, Gary used to have a bedwetting problem up until he was 13 years old. And he said that his mother, every single time that he would do this, would strip him naked, put him into a bathtub, and wash his genitals. Now he's, 11, 12, 13. That's a little old to be washing your child, especially his genitals. And it was said that she'd done this either in the nude or in her underwear. Regardless, this really didn't help Gary growing up. And on top of that, it's alleged that she would sunbathe outside naked and just do things on purpose to confuse young Gary. And Gary even said to a psychologist after all this comes out that it painted this weird picture of his mother to him, and it even led to conflicting feelings of anger and sexual attraction to his mother, and he even fantasized about killing her at this age. At 12 and 13 years old, he's already thinking about murder, and he's already fantasizing about his mother. He's already got this predisposition to sex workers. It's really not helping him out at all. But regardless, Gary was described as an average kid growing up in school, even kind of stupid. And they didn't really say that he was like special education or anything like that, but he didn't excel. He didn't really have any notable achievements in school. And some teachers and students don't even remember him. And that's crazy because during the time that he, quote, didn't stand out, he was killing animals, he was torturing cats, he was stalking young girls, walking home, following them, just being an overall creep. He even forced himself on a young girl one time, but nothing happened. And during this time, right about his 16th birthday, he actually lured a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him several times. And the little boy, asked him, why would you do this? And he just said, I just wanted to know how it felt, and he walks away. Luckily, this kid doesn't die. He goes to the hospital for a couple of weeks, but apparently he didn't know Gary at all because he was never charged. They reported it, but nothing ever happened, and the only way we even know about this is because of Gary's confession later on. And if that's not crazy enough, everyone thinks this guy's normal. Throughout this entire time, they think he's normal, and you'll think about that later as he grows up into an adult and he's doing these crazy things and nobody knows. He's just so good at acting normal that no one thinks he's going to be that person. Anyways, after this, Gary graduates high school in 1969, and he immediately marries his lover, Claudia Craig. And almost weeks after he gets married, he joins the Navy and he's shipped off to Vietnam on his first tour. And as soon as he gets to where they're going, he starts using sex workers. And his excuse for using sex workers overseas is that his wife is too far away. And that seems like the most Chad thing he could say at the time. But whatever, it's the 70s, apparently that's normal. But 4 months into his tour, he actually gets gonorrhea from one of these sex workers. And he is pissed. For some reason, he's angry at this sex worker for giving him gonorrhea, even though he's the one having unprotected sex with prostitutes. But he continues having unprotected sex with prostitutes throughout the remainder of his tour there. And when he comes back, ironically enough, his wife Claudia has been cheating on him the whole time as well, which he's very angry about. Instead of being like, oh, okay, we both suck, let's get a divorce, he's super pissed off. But unfortunately for him and everyone else, they get a divorce immediately after he returns back home. And now he's in Seattle. He gets this job back at this factory where they paint trucks, and that's the job that he'll actually hold for the rest of his life. And soon after this, he meets his next lover, Marcia Winslow. And Marcia actually said that the way that Gary picked her up was similar to the way that a police officer pulls you over. He pulls to the side of the road, rolls the window down, starts asking these questions. It's kind of aggressive. And it was weird enough that she asked him later on, did you want to be a police officer? And he says, yes, I actually wanted to be a police officer, but I failed the test, which is right in line with him being stupid. But she says that they kind of hit it off. They start having sex all the time, and she does say, though, that in their first sexual encounters, he calls her Claudia several times, which is really fucking weird. But regardless of all that, they end up getting married in 1972. And after they get married, their sex life amps up. He's wanting sex 2, 3, 4 times a day, and she's just struggling to keep up. But this man is addicted. Not only was he having sex with his wife all this time, he is still utilizing sex workers during this time. I don't know how he even has this much time. He works a full-time job, has sex with his wife, has sex with prostitutes. The man doesn't sleep. I don't know. But in 1975, Marcia gives birth to their son, Matthew. And Gary was enraged by this. Not the typical reaction of a father starting a new family, but he was only mad because after she gave birth, there was a period of time where they couldn't have sex. And he was so sex crazed that this drove him insane. He started using sex workers more and more, and when they finally did get to have sex after she was healed from the birth, it got more and more aggressive. She said he started choking her, sneaking up on her and scaring her, and it eventually overwhelmed her to the point where they got a divorce. And this was in May of 1981 when they finally got a divorce, and somehow, someway, this psycho keeps his son during the divorce. That's hard to do in 2019, much less back in this time. He keeps the son, and they're both crazy, but there was There was a restraining order involved, but there's really not that much detail on their divorce that I could find. After this, he begins experimenting with different types of sex workers. He starts having sex outside. He starts tying people up, but this is all consensual, and he somehow has the time to have several girlfriends during this time, which is also, like I said, he must not sleep because he's got several girlfriends that he's playing along. He's got sex workers. He still has a job. He's taking care of his son. Who knows how this guy managed his time? But during all of this time, he's just becoming angry for some reason. He can't get enough sex with all this stuff going on, and it eventually catches up with him because in May of 1982, he's arrested for soliciting an undercover sheriff's deputy who's disguised as a sex worker. And this is the time where things go fucking crazy in the state of Washington. Just shortly after, in 1982, there were some boys who were playing by the Green River, and they spot what they think is a mannequin floating around in the water, but upon their closer inspection, it's not a mannequin, it's the body of a young girl. And shortly after this, in August, 4 more bodies were found around the Green River. And this is kind of where the Green River Killer comes from. Just because the initial bodies were found there, not all of these bodies were found there, but the first couple were there. The rest of them were scattered in the woods. This guy even went as far as Oregon dropping bodies off. And to be specific, and to kind of capture how fucked up this guy was, he took his son with him to hide the bodies in Oregon when he was trying to throw the police off of his tail. And to be stupid, this guy was trying very hard to outsmart the King County Sheriff's Department. He was going as far as taking the fingernails and hair off of all the bodies. Just because they would scratch him, or for whatever reason, he was trying very hard. And this is what made the case so hard for everyone, because this guy was dumb and he was making mistakes, but he was making mistakes that he didn't know would come back to haunt him. He was leaving plenty of DNA, but he was just mangling these bodies to the point that no one could really recognize what was going on. And he would always find really secluded areas, whether it was his truck or the middle of the woods or in his house, to do these things. And he said that when he killed, he'd done it quickly and no one ever suffered, which is absolute bullshit. If you've ever been choked and you didn't want to be choked, you're suffering. So I don't know why I even said that. I guess he was trying to justify it some weird way. But keep in mind, the way that he was building trust with these girls in order to be able to be in the situation of putting his hand around their throat and choking them was he would use pictures of his son in his wallet, or leave his son's toys in the back of the car to kind of build the trust with these women, because people are finding bodies, like the news of sex workers' bodies showing up in the river is circulating. He has to actually convince them, no, that's not me. He even said that he was asked over 50 times by sex workers if he was the Green River Killer, and he, as fucked up as he is, was using his son to his advantage, because you wouldn't think, oh, this guy's got pictures of his son, there's toys laying around, they would feel comfortable. But I mean, for me, I feel like if you're going out of your way to show me pictures of your kids and I'm a sex worker, that's going to be a red flag to me, but I'm not there. And the way that he selected his victims was really because he thought that sex workers wouldn't be missed. No one would report them. It would take long enough for them to even know they were gone, that the evidence would be destroyed. And mostly he was right, but he wasn't all the way right. On April 30th of 1983, one of the victims that had been missing, their boyfriend starts following a pickup truck that he thought had something to do with the crimes. And it turns out this truck belonged to Gary Ridgway. And the police followed up on this, and you would think this is the point, like, oh, holy shit, they've got him, it's him. But no, they interview Gary, and he somehow talks his way out of it and denies any contact, and with no evidence, he goes free. But by this time that they talked to Gary, they had already found 11 bodies. A very short period of time. This is only a year, 11 bodies, that's crazy. But it would take 3 dozen bodies being found in or around the Green River for the King County Sheriff's Department to develop a task force specifically dedicated to the Green River Killer. And that is insane. 36 bodies had to be found before these guys were like, oh, we should put our heads together and work this one out. Obviously, I don't have the details and I can't speak for the sheriff's department, but I feel like it's a little excessive, and it might even help kind of prove Gary's point that no one really took this serious enough to look into it until it was way too late. By December 1984, the victim toll was 42. That is a ton of people in this slightly dense area, but 42 people is insane, especially when they're all the same type of person. The task force became so desperate that they actually went out of their way to go and interview Ted Bundy, who was still in jail at the time. They asked him, what is your opinion? Can you help us out? Try to figure out who this is. And Ted Bundy suggested that the killer had to be revisiting the sites to have sex with the bodies. And this became one of the most important elements of the entire case because it was true. And can you imagine how much of a serial killer ego boost Ted Bundy would have got if he were alive to see the conviction and to know that he was right? But using this information, they start collecting physical evidence, and Gary said that this was his favorite part because he would keep these bodies in piles, in mass graves, and he would revisit them 5, 6, 7 bodies, and he would have sex with the corpses. He would have sex with the corpses so much, he said, that they would be rotting, and he would have to move maggots and insects out of the bodies just to continue to have sex with them. And when he would finally get tired of them, he would put rocks and sticks inside every orifice of the bodies, and then he would move on to either the next body or the next pile. So, the police start collecting DNA evidence off of these bodies, which was smart because in the early 80s, DNA testing wasn't even a thing. They just had the peace of mind to know that eventually, hey, this is going to be important. We should probably hang on to this. And they start to develop a profile of this guy, but they still really can't figure out who it is. They even brought Gary in for questioning on 1984, and he offered to take a polygraph test. And of course, like most serial killers, he passed the polygraph test because the thing with lie detector tests is they pick up stress. They don't actually pick up lies, and they're fucking useless. And I'm not sure why they even use them anymore. You can't use it in court. And I'll say that probably on every podcast I do. Lie detector tests are bullshit. Later on in 1987, he suspected again of another disappearance of 2 different females, and this time they actually get to search his house. But they don't find anything inside this guy's house at all. They do take some saliva and hair samples, but other than that, there's no evidence that they can hold him on for any reason. And this is the part that gets curious for some people because they think most serial killers keep trophies, right? Like he didn't have anything in there at all. What he did that was different from most serial killers is that he kept jewelry. And some of the jewelry he would take with him to work and leave in the female's bathroom in hopes that some of his female coworkers would steal them, and then he could see them walking around with the jewelry of the victims that he had slain. That's next level psycho shit right there. And the jewelry that he didn't take to work for that reason, he would sell in yard sales where he'd have all these random items. And apparently when someone questioned him one time about why he had so many female items in his garage sale, he just said that he had a bunch of girlfriends, which he wasn't lying because the man stayed running through girlfriends and sex workers, etc. Somehow during this time, he meets and marries Judith Lynch in 1988. And I know I've said it twice already, but this man had girlfriends, he gets married, he's still having sex workers in and out of his life, he's doing all these murders, going back to piles of bodies, having sex with them, and raising a son all at the same time. No idea. Anyways, during this time that he gets married in 1988, the body count was all the way to 46. This is a point in the story, though, where nothing really big happens for the next couple of years. A couple more people went missing during the time, but there was no new evidence, no new leads, nothing helping the sheriff's department find out who did this. And it kind of goes cold for a little bit, all the way until 2001, when the state crime lab starts using new DNA testing methods, and they start working through some of this evidence, which now is up to 14 years old. and they get a break. This 14-year-old DNA evidence links Gary Ridgway to 3 of the victims that they pulled evidence off of. This is obviously huge, but now they run into a problem where it's been years. They don't even know if Gary Ridgway is around the area anymore. So they have to start thinking, where would he be if he was going to be around this area? So of course, they go back to the Pacific Highway South, which is where he had picked up the majority of his victims. It's kind of, they call it like the Strip. If you think of Las Vegas Strip, it's kind of the same thing. It's where all the street workers are, and it's where all the hub is. They place some undercover officers in different locations, and they go a while with nothing. But on Friday, November 16th of 2001, they got exactly what they wanted. Because on that day, Gary Ridgway drove his 1992 Ford Ranger down the Pacific Highway South, and all that he had on him was $30 and some latex gloves. And he's driving around, and he spots a girl that he takes a liking to. So he pulls over, and he rolls his window down, and he starts to summon this girl with the money in his hand. And he pulls into this parking lot. He gets out of his truck. He puts his arms on the trucks, and he keeps summoning her with the money, and she starts to walk over, and when she gets close enough, he says, "Hey, are you dating?" And she wasn't dating, but she was working for the King County Sheriff's Department as an undercover sex worker, and that's when they finally arrested him. And this is the part that gets a little strange, and it's the part that I really didn't understand when I was growing up, because I didn't even look at it in the same way that they did. But they were faced with this dilemma because they knew that they could put this guy to death immediately. They had evidence linking 3 of the murder victims to him. He's dead. He's a dead man. Death penalty. Easy. But they're facing this moral dilemma where, yeah, they could get him on 3, but that doesn't provide closure for the other 43 victims that they knew about. So they had to make what they called a deal with the devil. And really, all this deal was that Gary said if they would waive the death penalty, he would confess to everything that he had done. So of course they take this deal, and it was kind of controversial at the time because everybody just wanted him off the streets. They don't want him to do this anymore, blah, blah, blah. But they knew they did the right thing, and it turns out it was the right thing to do, as he tells them every single thing that he remembered, which is a ton. It was 133 pages of him confessing in great detail to 71 murders. Initially, he said it was 65, but he actually redacted his statement to include all of the 71 that he remembered. And on November 5th, 2003, which is my birthday, he pled guilty to 48 counts of murder, making him the most prolific serial killer in United States history by confirmed murders. Later in 2011, new evidence led to the conviction of an additional murder, making his total confirmed kills 49. King County believes that he is responsible for the 71 murders he confessed to, but he never led them to the sites, and there's no evidence that could actually prove it. Gary himself believes that he murdered 90 plus people, but he just can't remember. He doesn't even remember his first kill, which is strange. Most serial killers, their first kill is the most important. Gary doesn't remember the first or even the names. These people meant absolutely nothing to him. But lucky for us, he's currently serving 49 back-to-back life sentences at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, Washington, which is the strangest name for a city ever. And holy shit, 71 murders. I probably couldn't tell you 71 people that I knew. I'm terrible with names, but this guy, it's not like he wasn't remembering the name of his neighbor. He wasn't remembering the name of the people he took their life away. That is insane. I'm going to post some pictures on social of what Gary looks like. He kind of now looks like a mix of Flanders from The Simpsons, and like his nose is so big, it's kind of like Gru from the Despicable Me movie. Back in the day though, if you look at the older pictures of him, he just looks like a regular ass guy, and apparently he was on the outside, but he was also the craziest person of all time. And I hope you enjoyed the information that I gave you. I'm kind of working off of everything I could find. There's so much information about this case, and if I missed something or if I misstated something, please let me know. Just shoot me a message on any of the social. But if you would like more of these, I love doing them. I love researching them. Just give me a suggestion. I'll look up everything that I can and I'll present it in this way. If you've got any advice for me or you think that I did something wrong, please just let me know. If you want to support me and you want to support the TM podcast and become part of this team, please help me out and like and subscribe on all of my social, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or you could donate or subscribe on Patreon. Everything is at the TM podcast. My website will be up soon and I'll put that link in all the social as well. Thank you so much. And intro and outro is done by the artist Stress.